On a Tuesday morning in March 2018, Charles Bennett stood in the empty parking lot of what was supposed to be his tour company office in Cebu City and felt the weight of 63 years collapse into a single, devastating realization. The woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with had vanished, taking $60,000 and every shred of dignity he thought he had protected. The address she had given him, Unit 12, Mango Square Business Center, didn't exist. The building was real enough, but Unit 12 was a janitorial closet. The glossy brochures she had shown him, the business permits with official-looking stamps, the photographs of the vans they were supposedly purchasing, all of it had been theater. Elaborate, convincing, meticulously crafted theater. Chuck Bennett was not a foolish man. He had built a delivery company from nothing in Phoenix, Arizona, survived a difficult divorce, raised 2 children, and navigated 4 decades of business dealings with his eyes wide open. He had watched other expats fall into traps in Southeast Asia and told himself he was different, smarter, more careful. But Melissa Santiago, if that was even her real name, had understood something fundamental about human nature that transcended intelligence or caution. She understood that loneliness creates blind spots. That hope, when properly cultivated, becomes indistinguishable from delusion, and that a man who believes he is too smart to be fooled is often the easiest mark of all. This is the story of how a practical, self-made American was systematically dismantled by someone who had turned deception into an art form. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. Charles Andrew Bennett had never imagined himself as the type of man who would retire to Southeast Asia. For most of his adult life, he had been too busy building Bennett Express Delivery to think much about retirement at all. What started as a single van and a pager in 1984 had grown into a fleet of 37 vehicles servicing the greater Phoenix metropolitan area. He was proud of that. Proud of every early morning, every difficult client, every year he had managed to turn a profit when larger companies were trying to squeeze him out. By 2016, at 61 years old, Chuck sold the company. The sale brought him $180,000 after taxes and debts, not enough to live lavishly in Arizona, but enough to live comfortably somewhere the dollar stretched further. His divorce from Patricia had been finalized 3 years earlier, and their 2 adult children, Sarah and Marcus, had their own lives now. Sarah was a nurse in Portland. Marcus worked in tech in Austin. Both had encouraged their father to enjoy himself, to travel, to do something other than sit alone in his condo watching the sun set over the desert. Chuck had always been a practical man. He researched cost of living in different countries the way he had once researched commercial vehicle insurance methodically, with spreadsheets and comparison charts. Thailand was popular, but felt oversaturated with retirees. Vietnam was intriguing, but the bureaucracy seemed complicated. The Philippines kept appearing in his searches. English was widely spoken. The cost of living was low. The people, according to every forum and blog he read, were exceptionally warm and welcoming. In September 2016, Chuck booked a 3-week exploratory trip to the Philippines. He flew into Manila, spent a few days adjusting to the chaos and humidity, then took a domestic flight to Cebu. The moment he stepped off the plane at Mactangent Cebu International Airport, something shifted in him. The air was thick and tropical, the pace slower, the atmosphere less frantic than Manila. He checked into a modest hotel near Fuente Osmeña Circle and spent his days walking, observing, and quietly falling in love with the rhythm of the city. Cebu offered him something Phoenix never had: anonymity without loneliness. He could sit in a cafe and read without anyone knowing his history. He could walk along the waterfront at Magellan's Cross and feel like he was starting over, not running away. The food was inexpensive and flavorful. The people smiled easily and often. By the end of his 3 weeks, Chuck had made a decision. He would return to Arizona, settle his affairs, and move to Cebu within 6 months. He returned to Phoenix in October with a plan. He sold most of his furniture, gave away what remained, and prepared himself for what he believed would be a modest, peaceful retirement. He imagined mornings at local markets, afternoons reading on a balcony, evenings at quiet restaurants where he could stretch his savings for decades. He did not imagine that within 18 months, more than a third of that money would be gone, taken by someone who had seen him not as a person, but as an opportunity. Chuck Bennett was not looking for romance when he joined Facebook in late 2016. He had created the account reluctantly, mostly to stay connected with Sarah and Marcus, and to share occasional photos of his new life once he moved to the Philippines. He posted sparingly a sunset over the Visayan Sea, a plate of lechon from a street vendor, the view from his modest apartment in Lahug. It was one of these photos, a shot of the Basilica Minore del Santo Niño at dusk, that caught the attention of Melissa Santiago. Her comment was simple, friendly, and disarming. "Beautiful photo. Are you living here in Cebu now? It's rare to see foreigners appreciate our culture so genuinely." Chuck glanced at her profile. Her name was Melissa Santiago, though she went by Liza. Her profile picture showed a woman in her early 30s with long dark hair, a bright smile, and kind eyes. Her cover photo featured a beach at sunset. Her page suggested she was a freelance travel agent based in Cebu, someone who helped tourists plan itineraries and book accommodations. She had several hundred friends and a handful of posts about local attractions, always written in clear, fluent English. Chuck replied, "Thank you. Yes, I moved here a few months ago, still getting used to everything, but I love it so far." The conversation continued in the comments, then moved to Messenger. Liza was warm, articulate, and curious. She asked him where he was from, what brought him to Cebu, whether he was enjoying the food. She offered recommendations, restaurants he should try, beaches he should visit, cultural events happening around the city. She never asked for anything. She never seemed too eager. She was simply present, friendly, and gradually becoming a regular part of his daily routine. Within 2 weeks, they were messaging every day. Good morning greetings, updates about their respective days. She told him about her work, how she had started her travel agency business a few years ago after working at a hotel in Mactan. She said it was difficult to make a living, but she loved helping people experience the beauty of the Philippines. She spoke fondly of her family, her mother, who lived in a small town in Bohol, and her younger brother, who was studying engineering in Manila. Chuck found himself looking forward to her messages. It had been years since someone had shown genuine interest in his life. Patricia, during the final years of their marriage, had stopped asking him about his day. His children loved him but were busy with their own lives. Liza, by contrast, seemed genuinely curious. She asked about his business, his family, his reasons for choosing the Philippines. She listened, or at least she gave the impression of listening in a way that made him feel valued. One evening in late January 2017, Liza sent him a voice message. Her voice was soft, slightly accented, and disarmingly sincere. "Hi, Chuck," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you for being such a good friend. It's really nice to talk to someone who isn't just looking for fun or games, you know? There are so many players here, but you seem different. You seem like a serious man." Chuck listened to the message 3 times. Something about hearing her voice made her feel more real, more present. He recorded a voice message in return, thanking her for the kind words and agreeing that it was refreshing to have a genuine connection. He meant every word. By February, they had progressed to video calls. The first call was brief, slightly awkward, both of them laughing at the delay in the connection. But Liza looked exactly like her photos, perhaps even prettier in motion. Her smile warm and her demeanor relaxed. She was sitting in what appeared to be a small office, a desk behind her with a computer and stacks of brochures. She spoke about a recent client, a couple from Germany who wanted to visit Bohol and Palawan. She seemed busy, professional, and grounded. Chuck found himself captivated, not just by her appearance, but by the ease of their conversation. She made him laugh. She asked thoughtful questions. She never pressed him for personal information, but when he offered it, she responded with empathy and understanding. When he mentioned his divorce, she said softly, "That must have been really hard, but I think it takes courage to start over. Not everyone can do that." It was exactly what he needed to hear. By the end of February, Chuck realized he was falling for her. It was a gradual realization, not a sudden spark. He noticed that his mood lifted when her name appeared on his phone. He caught himself thinking about her during meals, wondering what she was doing, whether she had eaten, whether she was thinking of him too. He had not felt this way in years, perhaps not since the early days with Patricia, decades ago. One evening in early March, during a video call, Liza said something that shifted the dynamic entirely. She was quieter than usual, her eyes slightly red, as though she had been crying. Chuck asked if she was okay. She hesitated, then said, "I'm fine. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find someone who really sees me, not just what I can do for them, but who I really am." Chuck's heart ached for her. "I see you, Liza," he said. "I think you're incredible." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You're very kind, Chuck. I wish more men were like you." That night, Chuck lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in his mind. He felt protective of her, drawn to her vulnerability, and convinced that what they had was rare and worth pursuing. It never occurred to him that vulnerability, when weaponized, is one of the most effective tools in a scammer's arsenal. In late March 2017, Chuck did something he had not done in over a decade. He invited a woman to visit him. He suggested that Liza come to Lahug for dinner, but she countered with a better idea. Why didn't he come to her neighborhood near Ayala Center? She knew a wonderful restaurant, she said, quiet and affordable, with the best kinala in Cebu. Chuck agreed immediately. He dressed carefully that evening, a clean button-down shirt, khaki pants, his good leather sandals. He took a taxi to the address she had sent, his stomach tight with anticipation. He had not been on anything resembling a date since before his divorce, and the nervousness surprised him. He was 62 years old, for God's sake. But as the taxi wound through the streets of Cebu, past the glowing storefronts and the evening crowds, he felt like a younger man, hopeful and alive. Liza was waiting for him outside the restaurant when he arrived. She wore a simple yellow sundress and sandals, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. When she saw him, her face lit up, and she walked forward with open arms. The hug was warm, lingering, and felt entirely natural. "It's so good to finally see you in person," she said, pulling back to look at him. "You're even more handsome than in the video calls." Chuck laughed, embarrassed and pleased. "You're very kind, and you look beautiful." The restaurant was small, tucked into a side street, with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting. It was not romantic in the conventional sense, but it felt authentic, and Chuck appreciated that. They ordered kinila, grilled squid, and rice, along with 2 bottles of San Miguel. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Liza was animated, funny, and attentive. She asked about his family, his life in Phoenix, the delivery business he had built. She listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that showed she was paying attention. Chuck, in turn, asked about her work. She explained that her travel agency was still small, operating mostly through Facebook and word of mouth. She didn't have a physical office yet, just a small workspace she rented by the hour in a business center near Ayala. Her dream, she said, was to expand, to hire a few employees, to work with hotels and resorts directly, instead of relying on third-party commissions. "But it's hard," she admitted. "I don't have capital, and banks here don't lend to small businesses unless you already have collateral." Chuck nodded sympathetically. He understood the struggle of building something from nothing. He told her about the early days of Bennett Express, sleeping in the van between deliveries, barely making rent. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You're an inspiration, Chuck," she said. "Not many people have that kind of strength." The evening stretched into hours. They walked along the waterfront afterward, the city lights reflecting off the water. Liza looped her arm through his as they walked, and Chuck felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the beer. When he finally dropped her off at her apartment building, a modest mid-rise near Mango Avenue, she kissed him on the cheek and said, "Thank you for tonight. I haven't felt this happy in a long time." Chuck returned to his apartment that night feeling like the luckiest man in Cebu. Over the following weeks, they saw each other frequently. Dinners, walks, visits to local markets. Liza introduced him to her favorite places, a cafe that served exceptional Barako coffee, a street vendor who made the best balut, a hidden viewpoint overlooking the city. She never asked him to pay for everything, often insisting on splitting the bill or covering her own share. This impressed Chuck. She was independent, proud, and clearly not interested in exploiting him financially. By mid-April, their relationship had become physical. Chuck had been hesitant at first, unsure if she was truly interested or simply being polite. But one evening, after dinner at his apartment, Liza stayed. They talked late into the night, and when she leaned in to kiss him, it felt natural, inevitable, and entirely mutual. She spent the night, and when Chuck woke the next morning to find her making coffee in his kitchen, he felt a profound sense of contentment. Within a month, Liza had effectively moved in. It happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. A toothbrush in the bathroom, a change of clothes in the closet. Her presence at breakfast, at dinner, in the small routines of daily life. Chuck didn't mind. In fact, he welcomed it. For the first time since his divorce, he didn't feel alone. One evening in early May, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Liza said something that would set the course for everything that followed. She turned to him, her expression serious, and said, "Chuck, I need to tell you something. I think I'm falling in love with you." Chuck's heart swelled. He reached for her hand. "I'm falling for you too, Liza." She smiled, but there was something vulnerable in her eyes. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you, someone who sees me as more than just, I don't know, more than just a Filipina girl looking for a foreigner. You see me as a person, as an equal." "That's because you are," Chuck said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in silence for a long moment. It was one of the happiest nights of Chuck's life. It was also the beginning of the trap. The idea for the tour business came up organically, or at least that's how Liza made it seem. It was late May 2017, and they were having lunch at a small outdoor eatery near the Cebu IT park. Liza had been unusually quiet that morning, and when Chuck asked if something was wrong, she sighed and said, "I'm just frustrated with work. I had 2 clients cancel their bookings this week. The commissions I was counting on are gone, and I'm back to square one." Chuck listened sympathetically. He knew how precarious freelance work could be. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked. Liza shook her head. "No, it's okay. It's just, I keep thinking that if I had my own business, a real business, not just freelancing, I could control things better. I could offer better services, build relationships with hotels and resorts, maybe even hire a small team. But that takes money, and I don't have that kind of capital." Chuck set down his fork. "What kind of business are you thinking about?" Liza hesitated, as though she was embarrassed to even say it out loud. "I've been thinking about starting a small tour company. Nothing huge. Just a few vans, a driver or 2, and packages for tourists who want to explore Cebu, Bohol, maybe Bantayan Island. I could partner with hotels and offer bundled deals, but it would take at least 2 million pesos to get started, maybe more." Chuck did the math in his head. 2 million pesos was roughly $40,000. It was a significant amount, but not impossible. He had 180,000 in savings. He could afford to invest and still have a comfortable cushion. "Why don't we do it together?" Chuck said. Liza looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why don't we start the business together? You have the knowledge, the connections, the language skills. I have capital and business experience. It makes sense." Liza's eyes widened. "Chuck, I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering." She looked at him for a long moment, and Chuck saw something shift in her expression, something that looked like hope, or perhaps relief. "Are you serious?" she asked quietly. "Completely serious," Chuck said. "We could make this work, Liza. We could build something real." She reached across the table and took his hand. Her eyes were wet. "You don't know how much this means to me," she said. "I've been trying so hard to make something of myself, but it's been so difficult. To have someone believe in me like this, I don't even know what to say." Chuck squeezed her hand. "Say we'll do it together." She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next 2 weeks, Liza threw herself into planning. She created a business proposal, printed, bound, and surprisingly professional. It outlined the services they would offer: customized day tours, island hopping packages, city tours of Cebu and Bohol, airport transfers, and corporate event coordination. She included projected costs: 2 used Toyota Hiace vans at 800,000 pesos each, business registration and permits at 150,000 pesos, initial marketing and website development at 200,000 pesos, and operating capital for the first 6 months at another 300,000 pesos. The total came to 2,250,000 pesos, roughly $45,000. Chuck reviewed the proposal carefully. It was thorough, well-researched, and realistic. Liza had clearly put thought into every detail. She even included a list of potential hotel partners and a draft contract for drivers. Chuck was impressed. This wasn't some half-baked fantasy. This was a legitimate business plan. "I think this could really work," Chuck said after reading through the proposal a second time. Liza beamed. "Really? You think so?" "I do. Let's move forward." They decided to form a partnership. Liza would handle operations, client relations, and local logistics. Chuck would manage finances, oversee contracts, and provide strategic guidance. They would split profits 50-50 once the business became profitable. It felt fair, equitable, and exciting. In early June, Chuck transferred $45,000, 2,250,000 pesos from his Arizona bank account to his Philippine peso account, then wired the full amount to an account Liza had set up for the business. The account was in her name because, as she explained, foreign ownership of Philippine businesses was complicated and subject to strict regulations. It would be easier, she said, to operate under her name initially, with a formal partnership agreement that protected Chuck's investment. Chuck agreed. He trusted her completely. The first purchase was the vans. Liza showed him photos of 2 white Toyota Hiace vans she had found through a dealer in Mandaue City. They looked clean, well-maintained, and appropriate for tourist transport. She sent him copies of the sales agreements and the dealer's business license. Everything appeared legitimate. Next came the office. Liza said she had secured a small office space in Mango Square Business Center, a commercial building near the city center. The rent was 35,000 pesos per month, and she had paid the first 3 months up front along with a security deposit. She sent Chuck photos of the office, a modest room with a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window overlooking the street. It wasn't fancy, but it was professional. Chuck visited the business center once with Liza. She walked him through the lobby, pointed out the office location on the directory board, and showed him the key. "This is ours," she said, smiling. "This is where it all starts." Chuck felt a surge of pride. They were building something together. Something real, something tangible, something that would provide for both of them in the years to come. The business permits and licenses took longer. Liza explained that Philippine bureaucracy was slow, expensive, and often required under-the-table payments to move things along. She paid the necessary fees and provided Chuck with copies of the permits, business registration certificates, mayor's permits, Department of Tourism accreditation. The documents looked official, complete with stamps, signatures, and reference numbers. By mid-July, everything seemed to be in place. The vans were purchased, the office was rented, the permits were secured. Liza had hired 2 drivers, both referred by friends, and had begun marketing their services on Facebook and through local hotel contacts. She showed Chuck the brochures she had designed, glossy, colorful, and professional. The business was called Island Gateway Tours, and the tagline read, "Your Gateway to Paradise." Chuck was thrilled. He had invested $60,000 in total by this point, more than the original estimate due to unexpected costs and additional operating capital, but he believed in the vision. He believed in Liza, and he believed in the future they were building together. It never occurred to him that every document, every photo, every receipt, and every promise was a carefully constructed lie. The first sign that something was wrong came in late July 2017, though Chuck didn't recognize it as a warning at the time. Liza had been unusually distracted for several days, spending long hours on her phone and laptop, speaking in rapid Cebuano during phone calls that she always took in another room. When Chuck asked if everything was okay, she smiled and said, "Yes, just dealing with some difficult clients. You know how it is." Chuck accepted the explanation without question. He had dealt with difficult clients himself for decades. He understood the stress. But then Liza announced that she needed to go to Manila for a few days. "There's a supplier I need to meet with," she explained. "They provide discounted rates for resort bookings, and if I can lock in a partnership with them, it'll be huge for the business. But I need to meet them in person." Chuck offered to come with her, but Liza shook her head. "It's better if I go alone. These suppliers can be particular about dealing with foreigners. They'll take me more seriously if I'm representing a Filipino-owned business." It made sense, or at least Chuck told himself it did. He gave Liza 20,000 pesos for travel expenses and kissed her goodbye at the airport. She promised to call him every evening and to be back within 4 days. The first 2 days, Liza called as promised. The conversations were brief, she was tired, the meetings were going well, she missed him. On the 3rd day, she didn't call. Chuck sent her a text message. No response. He tried calling. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. By the fourth day, Chuck was worried. He sent multiple messages, tried calling repeatedly, and even reached out to her on Facebook Messenger. Nothing. Her last seen status showed she had been online briefly that morning, but she hadn't opened his messages. On the fifth day, Liza finally called. Her voice was strained, apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Chuck. My phone died and I lost my charger. I've been so busy with the meetings. I didn't have time to find a replacement until now." Chuck exhaled in relief. "I was worried something had happened to you." "I'm fine," she said. "Everything is fine. I'll be home tomorrow." But she didn't come home the next day, or the day after that. When Chuck finally reached her again, she said the supplier wanted her to visit one of their partner resorts in Palawan to see the facilities firsthand. "It's an incredible opportunity," she said, "but it means I'll be gone a few more days." Chuck felt a flicker of unease. "Liza, is everything okay? You don't sound like yourself." "I'm just exhausted," she said. "This has been more work than I expected, but it'll be worth it, I promise." When Liza finally returned to Cebu 10 days after she had left, she looked different, thinner, more tired. Her eyes avoided his when she spoke. Chuck tried to ask about the meetings, the suppliers, the resort in Palawan, but her answers were vague and evasive. "It's all very technical," she said. "I'll explain everything once I've had some rest." But she never explained. Instead, she spent the next several days sleeping, scrolling through her phone, and leaving the apartment for hours at a time without saying where she was going. When Chuck pressed her, she snapped at him for the first time since they had met. "I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now, Chuck. Can you please just give me some space?" Chuck backed off, hurt and confused. Something had shifted, but he couldn't pinpoint what. He told himself it was just stress. Starting a business was difficult. Liza was under pressure. Things would return to normal once the dust settled. But things didn't return to normal. By mid-August, Liza was distant, distracted, and increasingly absent. She stopped making breakfast. She stopped asking about his day. She no longer curled up beside him on the couch in the evenings. When Chuck tried to discuss the business, she changed the subject or said she was too tired to talk about work. One evening, Chuck decided to visit the office at Mango Square Business Center. He had only been there once, briefly, and he wanted to see how things were progressing. He wanted to reassure himself that the business they had built together was real and thriving. He took a taxi to Mango Square and walked into the building's lobby. The directory board listed dozens of businesses, but he couldn't find Island Gateway Tours. He asked the receptionist, a young woman in a crisp uniform, if she knew which unit the company occupied. She looked at him blankly. "Island Gateway Tours? I don't think we have a business by that name here." Chuck's stomach tightened. "Are you sure? My partner rented an office here a few months ago. Unit 12. The receptionist checked her computer, then shook her head. "Unit 12 is a storage closet. It's not rented out to businesses." Chuck felt the ground shift beneath him. "Can I see it?" The receptionist hesitated, then called a security guard to escort him. They walked down a narrow hallway to a door marked 12. The guard unlocked it. Inside was a janitor's closet, mops, cleaning supplies, and a faint smell of disinfectant. Chuck stared at the space, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This was the office Liza had shown him in photos, but there was no desk, no chairs, no filing cabinet, just cleaning equipment and concrete walls. "Are you okay, sir?" the guard asked. Chuck didn't answer. He turned and walked out of the building, his heart pounding in his chest. Chuck didn't confront Liza immediately. He needed to think. He needed to gather his thoughts and understand what was happening before he said something he might regret. But the unease that had been simmering for weeks now boiled over into full-blown panic. That evening, while Liza was out, she had said she was meeting a client. Though Chuck no longer believed her, he went through her belongings. He hated himself for doing it, felt ashamed and invasive, but he needed answers. He found her laptop open on the kitchen table. She had left it unlocked. Chuck hesitated for only a moment before opening her email account. What he found made his blood run cold. There were emails from at least 4 other men, foreigners, all of them. An Australian named David, a German named Klaus, a British man named Peter, and an American from California named Robert. The emails were flirtatious, affectionate, filled with the same kind of language Liza had used with Chuck in the early days. She called them babe, sweetheart, My love. She sent them photos, some of the same photos she had sent to Chuck. She made promises. She talked about future plans. And she asked for money. Not aggressively, but subtly, carefully. She mentioned struggles with her business, unexpected expenses, a sick family member who needed medical care. Some of the men had sent her money. Chuck could see PayPal receipts, Western Union confirmations, bank transfer notifications. Chuck felt sick. He scrolled through the emails, each one a dagger to his chest. She had been running the same scam on multiple men simultaneously. The travel agency, the tour business, the sick mother, the struggling entrepreneur trying to build a better life. It was all a script, a performance. And Chuck had been one of many paying audience members. He found photos on her laptop that she had never sent to him. Photos of her with other men, smiling, holding hands, posing in restaurants and hotel rooms. Some of the photos were recent, some were taken while she was supposedly in Manila meeting suppliers. Chuck's hands trembled as he closed the laptop. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the deception. He had given this woman $60,000. He had trusted her, loved her, imagined a future with her, and all of it, every word, every smile, every moment had been a lie. When Liza returned that night, Chuck was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in casually, her expression neutral, but when she saw his face, she stopped. "What's wrong?" she asked. Chuck stood up. His voice was steady, though his hands were shaking. "I went to Mango Square today." Liza's face paled. "There is no office," Chuck continued. "Unit 12 is a janitor's closet. There never was an office, was there?" Liza didn't respond. She just stood there, frozen. "I looked at your laptop," Chuck said. "I saw the emails. David, Klaus, Peter, Robert. How many of us are there, Liza? How many men have you done this to?" Liza's expression hardened. The vulnerability, the sweetness, the warmth, all of it vanished in an instant. What remained was something cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of remorse. "You don't understand," she said flatly. "Then explain it to me," Chuck said, his voice rising. "Explain how you took $60,000 from me. Explain the fake business permits, the fake office, the fake suppliers in Manila. Explain the other men. Explain any of it." Liza crossed her arms. "You wanted to believe it," she said. "All of you did. You wanted to believe that some beautiful Filipina girl actually loved you, that you were special, that you weren't just another lonely old man throwing money at someone half your age." The words hit Chuck like a physical blow. He had no response, because part of him knew she was right. He had wanted to believe. He had needed to believe. "Where's the money, Liza?" Chuck asked quietly. She shrugged. "Gone, spent. I have expenses too, you know. The vans, the permits, the business registration, all fake," she said, almost bored. "The photos were from online listings. The permits were photoshopped. The account I set up, that was real. But the money didn't go to any business. It went to me." Chuck felt his knees weaken. He sat down heavily on the couch. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you do this?" Liza looked at him for a long moment, and for a brief second, Chuck thought he saw something like pity in her eyes. But then it was gone. "Because I could," she said simply. She walked into the bedroom, packed a small bag, and left the apartment without another word. Chuck sat on the couch, staring at nothing, as the door clicked shut behind her. Chuck spent the next 3 days in a fog. He didn't eat. He barely slept. He sat in his apartment replaying every conversation, every moment, every decision, trying to understand how he had been so thoroughly deceived. On the 4th day, he forced himself to take action. He went to the Cebu City police station and filed a report. The officer who took his statement was polite but detached. He asked for documentation, bank transfer receipts, screenshots of messages, any proof that the money had been taken under false pretenses. Chuck provided everything he had. The officer nodded, made notes, and said they would investigate. But his tone suggested this was not a priority. "These cases are difficult," the officer said, "especially when money is transferred willingly. It's hard to prove fraud." "But she lied," Chuck said. "She created fake documents. She scammed me." "I understand, sir, but unless we can locate her and prove intent, there's not much we can do." Chuck left the station feeling defeated. He contacted the bank, hoping to trace the account where he had sent the money, but the account had been closed. The funds had been withdrawn in cash over several weeks. There was no trail. He tried to find Liza. He went to the address she had given him for her apartment, but the landlord said no one by that name had ever lived there. He searched for her on Facebook, but her profile had been deactivated. He contacted the other men whose emails he had seen, warning them, but only one responded, David, the Australian. He said he had already lost $30,000 to her and had filed a police report in Sydney, but nothing had come of it. Chuck realized, slowly and painfully, that the woman he had known as Melissa Santiago didn't exist. The name was fake. The identity was fabricated. The entire person he had fallen in love with was a construct, carefully designed to extract money from lonely, trusting men. By the end of August 2017, Chuck had lost $60,000, more than a third of his retirement savings. His bank account, which had once held $180,000, now held just over $115,000. It was enough to survive, but the comfortable retirement he had envisioned was gone. Worse than the financial loss was the emotional devastation. Chuck had believed he was smarter than this. He had believed he could spot a scam. He had believed he was building a genuine connection with someone who valued him. Instead, he had been a mark, a target, a source of income for a professional con artist. The shame was suffocating. He couldn't bring himself to tell Sarah or Marcus what had happened. He couldn't face their pity, their concern, their inevitable questions about how he could have been so foolish. Instead, he withdrew. He stopped answering their calls. He stopped posting on Facebook. He isolated himself in his apartment and tried to make sense of a world that suddenly felt dangerous and untrustworthy. In September 2017, Chuck received a phone call from a detective at the Cebu City Police Department. Her name was Officer Maria Reyes, and she had been assigned to investigate Chuck's case, along with several similar reports that had been filed over the past year. "We believe your case is connected to at least 4 others," Officer Reyes said. "Same modus operandi, fake travel agency, fake business permits, romantic involvement, followed by requests for investment capital." Chuck felt a grim sense of validation. At least he wasn't the only one. "Do you know who she is?" he asked. "We have some leads," Officer Reyes said. "The name Melissa Santiago is an alias. We believe the woman you knew is part of a larger network operating in Cebu and Manila. They target foreign retirees and expats, typically men over 50. They use social media, dating apps, and sometimes even in-person introductions through third parties." "What are my chances of getting the money back?" Chuck asked, though he already knew the answer. Officer Reyes paused. "Honestly, sir, very low. These individuals are skilled at covering their tracks. They use multiple identities, burner phones, closed bank accounts, and cash transactions. Even if we locate the person, proving the case in court is difficult. Many victims don't want to come forward due to embarrassment." "I'm not embarrassed," Chuck said, though that was only partially true. "I want justice." "I understand," Officer Reyes said gently. "But justice in these cases is rare. The best we can do is warn others and try to prevent future victims." Over the following weeks, Chuck cooperated fully with the investigation. He provided every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence he had. Officer Reyes kept him updated, though the updates were rarely encouraging. The investigation had identified the woman using the name Melissa Santiago, but she had disappeared. Her last known location was Manila, but by the time police arrived, she was gone. In October, Officer Reyes informed Chuck that the case was being closed due to lack of evidence and inability to locate the suspect. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett," she said. "We did everything we could." Chuck thanked her and hung up. He sat on his balcony, staring out at the city that had once filled him with hope and felt nothing but emptiness. By November 2017, Chuck had made a decision. He couldn't stay in Cebu. Every street, every restaurant, every sunset reminded him of Liza, or rather, the woman he had believed was Liza. The city that had once represented a fresh start now felt like a crime scene. He moved south to Dumaguete, a smaller, quieter city known for its university and laid-back atmosphere. He rented a modest studio apartment near the waterfront, paid 6 months in advance, and tried to rebuild some semblance of a life. The money he had left, $115,000, was enough to live on if he was careful. He budgeted meticulously, cutting out all luxuries and focusing on survival. He ate at local carinderias, avoided alcohol, and spent his days walking along the boulevard, watching the sea. It was during one of these walks that Chuck met Thomas, a British expat in his 70s who had been living in Dumaguete for a decade. They struck up a conversation at a beachside cafe, and Thomas, sensing Chuck's guardedness, shared his own story. He too had been scammed not in the Philippines, but in Thailand years earlier. He had lost a significant amount of money to a woman who had promised him love and partnership. "It happens to the best of us," Thomas said. "Doesn't make you stupid, just makes you human." Chuck appreciated the sentiment, though he didn't entirely believe it. But talking to Thomas helped, and when Thomas invited him to a weekly meetup of expats at a local community center, Chuck reluctantly agreed. The group was small, 10 or 12 foreigners, mostly retirees, who gathered to share experiences, offer advice, and support one another. Chuck listened as others told their stories. Some had been scammed, others had navigated legal troubles, medical emergencies, or cultural misunderstandings. All of them had learned hard lessons about life in Southeast Asia. One evening, a younger expat, an American named Jason, asked the group for advice. He had met a Filipina online and was planning to send her money to help with a family emergency. The room went quiet. Then Chuck spoke. "Don't," he said. Jason looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't send her money," Chuck said. "Not yet. Not until you've met her in person, verified her story, and established real trust. And even then, be careful." Jason frowned. "But she needs help." "Maybe she does," Chuck said. "But maybe she doesn't. And if you send that money, you might never see it again. Trust me, I know." Chuck told his story. Not all of it. He couldn't bear to share every humiliating detail, but enough. He explained the fake business, the fake permits, the fake love. He explained how convincing it had all been, how real it had felt. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Jason said quietly, "Thank you. I'll be more careful." Over the following months, Chuck found a sense of purpose in the group. He became a regular, offering advice, sharing warnings, and helping newcomers avoid the mistakes he had made. He didn't sugarcoat his experience. He told them the truth, that romance scams were common, sophisticated, and devastatingly effective, that the people running them were professionals who understood psychology, manipulation, and exactly how to exploit loneliness. "They're not monsters," Chuck said during one meeting. "They're just people who see opportunity and take it, and if you're not careful, you'll be the opportunity." Today, at 68 years old, Charles Bennett still lives in Dumaguete. His savings have dwindled to just over $70,000, and he knows he'll need to stretch every peso for the rest of his life. He lives frugally, eats simply, and has learned to find contentment in small things: morning coffee at his favorite cafe, conversations with fellow expats, the sound of the waves at sunset. He volunteers regularly at the Expat Community Center, where he runs a monthly workshop on avoiding romance scams. He teaches newcomers how to recognize red flags, verify identities, and protect themselves financially and emotionally. He's blunt, sometimes uncomfortably so, but attendees appreciate his honesty. Many have told him that his warnings saved them from making catastrophic mistakes. Chuck has never heard from Liza again. He doesn't expect to. Officer Reyes told him that the woman likely moved to a different region, changed her identity, and continued targeting new victims. There was no closure, no apology, no accountability, just absence. The shame has faded somewhat, replaced by a kind of weary acceptance. Chuck knows he was not stupid. He was lonely, hopeful, and human. He made decisions that seemed rational at the time, trusting someone who had carefully engineered that trust. It doesn't excuse his mistakes, but it explains them. He still thinks about her, sometimes not the real woman, whoever she was, but the version of her he had believed in. The woman who laughed at his jokes, held his hand on evening walks, and spoke about building a future together. That woman never existed, but the feelings he had for her were real, and that, more than anything, is what makes the loss so difficult to accept. On quiet evenings, Chuck sits on his small balcony overlooking the sea and reflects on the lesson he learned the hard way. That love, when offered too freely to someone who views it as currency, becomes the most expensive investment of all. He doesn't regret coming to the Philippines. He regrets trusting too quickly, believing too easily, confusing affection with authenticity. But he survived, and in surviving, he found a way to help others avoid the same fate. It's not the retirement he imagined, but it's a life, and after everything, that's enough. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel. We bring you real stories of love scams and true crime from around the world, told with honesty and respect for the victims who trusted us with their experiences. Your support helps us continue this important work. Thank you for watching.